Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, I would like to extend to all of you a warm welcome at the headquarters of the Institute for Palestine Studies in Beirut, as we are gathered to listen and discuss a very important topic with our distinguished guest who came all the way from Sao Paulo to Lebanon and is launching a series of events starting from IPS and including a number of lectures at other prestigious Lebanese universities and academic centers. Before I introduce our guest, let me point out to the first time visitors to IPS that we are an apolitical, non-partisan, non-profit organization established in Beirut in 1963, aiming to provide academic and independent analysis, documentation, and research about the Palestine cause and the Arab-Israeli conflict. The Institute has published more than 800 books about Palestine in Arabic, English, French, and Spanish, and several of its books have been translated into numerous other languages. Hoping with the help of His Excellency, the Ambassador of Brazil, and our guest, that we will have some of our books translated into Portuguese. IPS publishes 3 magazines, 2 in English and the third in Arabic, and is aiming to relaunch its French magazine in 2026. The Institute has a library that stretches over 2 floors in the same building, with over 66,000 items, including books, magazines, newspapers, posters, maps, photos, and audiovisuals. It is open for researchers, instructors, journalists, and students. With the commencement of the genocidal war on Gaza, IPS launched a new line of publication, which is policy papers, having more than 150 policy papers published in Arabic, English, and French. It has also launched 7 documentation platforms about the destruction that reached the sectors of health, sports, culture, education, agriculture, in addition to the prisoners, the West Bank, and Jerusalem developments. And work is underway to launch the Shireen Abu Aqli Media Documentation Platform. I would like to add that within our efforts to preserve our academic integrity and financial independence, we launched a few years ago an art endowment project where hundreds of artists from around the world have donated from the collections of artworks to the Institute. And you can see some of them hanging around us in this particular hall. I would like to take this opportunity to extend IPS's deepest regards and appreciation to His Excellency, the Ambassador of Brazil to Lebanon, present amongst us this morning, Mr. Tarcisio Costa, for his friendship and enthusiasm. Mr. Costa has been kind enough to connect us to 3 Brazilian artists that have contributed 3 beautiful artworks also hung in this hall, and has been keen on strengthening ties with IPS in reflection to his government's advanced political position in support of Palestine cause as a moral cause in the first place, as well as a political and humanitarian cause. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you to Brazil. We are meeting at crucial times for Palestine and the Middle East. The war of genocide marks its second year after a few days. It led to the killing of more than 66,000 innocent civilians. Tens of thousands of them were children. The occupation has intentionally starved the people of Gaza with its uninterrupted blockade that stood in the path of allowing food supplies to enter the sector. It has targeted hospitals, schools, universities, agriculture, cultural and sports centers, residential and commercial spaces. It has practically demolished everything that can make life there sustainable. But the people of Gaza have not surrendered their right to their land, and they will not surrender. We hope that this agony comes to an end. In turning to our guest, Arlen Clemesha, PhD, is a professor of contemporary Arab history at the University of Sao Paulo, Brazil. And she is the director of the Center for Palestine Studies at the same university. Her books include Brazil and the Middle East, The Power of Civil Society, Marxism and Judaism, History of a Difficult Relation. She has translated several of Edward Said books into Portuguese, including the book Freud and the Non-European. Her writings have appeared in English, Portuguese, Spanish, French, Italian, Arabic, and Farsi. Arlene was a Brazilian civil society representative to the United Nations International Networks for Palestine from 2005 to 2015. In 2024, she engaged in the process of creating the first Brazilian academic center for Palestine studies at the University of Sao Paulo and became its first director. She brings with her a deep experience and sharp analytical view, which we are all looking forward to hear. Thank you so much for coming today, and please welcome with me Arlene. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Rami. Thank you to the IPS. I'm really very well impressed of this whole building and all the work done, and I'm eager to get to know the other floors and the archives and everything, and the books and publications. And thank you to Brazilian Ambassador to Lebanon, Ambassador Tarcísio Costa, who has taken up the initiative of setting up a chair for Brazil Lebanon studies. It's that's the reason why I'm here to collaborate with this initiative to set up a work that is very promising and hopefully ongoing. So I would like to begin by saying that it is really an honor to be here, and to address this distinguished audience for all that the IPS represents in terms of the preservation of Palestinian memory and culture since its foundation in 1963, and not least surviving so many difficulties, including the Israeli invasion from 1982 onwards. And as a historian, my admiration is also immense for the members of this institute, the founders of this institute, for example, Walid Halidi, who is so important for us historians. I also want to say that I deeply regret the passing away of Elias Houri, who was editing the Institute's journal, and from whom we have learned so much, not only through his books, his ideas, discussions, but through his defiant attitude, his sharp mind, and passionate soul. So his passing away was really a great loss. As was the case, a great loss was also the case with so many others, Palestinians in Lebanon or Palestinian Lebanese, who could have been here and should have been here, hadn't it been for lives shortened much too early due to their courageous resistance and relentless struggles against Israeli oppression and persecution. Hassan Kanafani, Naji Al-Ali, Samir Kassir, to mention only some. And as we speak, so many are still being deprived of becoming the poets, the teachers, the people who they could and certainly would have become weren't for the situation we are living in today. Having said that, I would like to begin by remembering a passage from a lecture Elias Houri gave in 2023 for a course that we organized together with the Brazilian Embassy in Palestine, named Brazil and Palestine, Sources of Identification. And in this course, Elias Houri, while describing the relation between the act of writing the history or writing the story of Palestine, he analyzed the tension of having to write an ongoing story in which the author was at the same time the narrator and the actor of his own unfinished narrative. And how do you write the story or the history of something that has not finished? He asked. Well, every time I visit Palestine, and I have only been there 3 times, I have felt the tension of being a witness to the constant, relentless shrinking of that land and imprisonment of the people. while refusing to be a bystander. Active, therefore, in our role as academics, amplifying Palestinian narratives that can hardly keep up with the rapid pace of destruction. So now, and for the past 2 years, we're facing a whole new and drastic situation in face of the genocide of the Palestinian people. Many changes have occurred in Brazilian civil society and in the government, and changes that are happening very fast. Even though, as humanity, we have definitely failed, we must not give up and look into these changes, to the disputes that are behind them, and the chances for further advancing the defense of Palestinian rights. It's not an exaggeration to say that the Brazilian government of Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, now in his third term in office, is one of the most vocal supporters of Palestine in the world. Elan Pape, who was recently spent a week in Sao Paulo, he mentioned that Brazil was the first country he visited where the positions of the president were actually better than 50% of the population. So he was referring, maybe with a bit of an exaggeration when he said 50%, but he was referring to the fact that Brazil is indeed a divided country, as many countries are today, which is the tendency, with a far right core base of 20% of the voters, and the majority of these far right 20% voters side with Israel. 20% of the Brazilian population is of evangelical faith, with huge varieties inside this group. It's not a monolithic group, but also there is a tendency for this evangelical sector to be pro-Zionist. Not only because of that basic idea, evangelical idea of having to create in the Holy Land the situation in which Jesus Christ existed, a Jewish country, nation, so that the return of Jesus Christ can happen, not because of this basic evangelical idea, but also from the way in which preachers, certainly in Brazil, speak of Israel. Many of these evangelicals see Israel as part of their own identity. And some even believe that Israel is Christian evangelical. They don't even know it's Jewish. And some of the most powerful churches in Brazil, evangelical churches, are strong supporters of the right wing in Brazil, especially Bolsonaro and his family. So they use Israel, they use Jewish symbols, they take Israeli flags to demonstrations and marches. The question for now is, has this popular support for Israel, which is important, has a large base, negatively influenced Brazil's support for Palestine? Has this played a role? Has it been more difficult because of this? Well, it's not easy to measure, but there are reasons to believe that yes, especially in the first year of the genocide, and less now. But my objective here, therefore, is not so much to speak about each and every action that the government took, which has been, we've had very, very good declarations. But I want to try to explain a bit of the tensions behind, the difficulties behind, not only in terms of the government, which I don't know, there are other people who know a lot more here than I do, but also in terms of civil society, the difficulties we have in doing our work, but which of course do not mean that we won't do it, no? In terms of the government, and I think we really have to separate three spheres. We have the governmental level of pro-Palestinian attitudes, declarations, actions, and so on to be thought about and analyzed. We have civil society in terms of then academics, NGOs, unions, and grassroots activism. And these three levels, they're not completely separated from each other, monolithic. They have dialogues, they have interconnections always, no? The most maybe at the moment still and hopefully action that gives us hope, no, is the flotilla, grassroots action that's happening right now. And we're all following, of course, the flotilla and eager and hoping that they arrive safely. There are 12 to 14, I'm not sure, Brazilians among the members of the flotilla, and even one of the founders, right, of the initiative, of the current initiative, because back in 2010, there was also a Brazilian, Yara Lee, on the Mavi Marmara. And so it's of course not a recent initiative. And there are several other grassroots activities in Brazil, which are always so nice to know about and to participate, and to even students' encampments, which happened before and happened again this week just now, and they're coming back soon for sure. So there's lots of this grassroots, but I'm going to focus. Um, the first thing I want to say about the governments, if you analyze the government's attitudes, it's that we noticed a rather slow, um, careful, hesitant initial position, like in the first 2-3 months. And then gradually we saw the president, the government in general, loosening and speaking more clearly and calling it a genocide. Lula was like the first world leader to call it a genocide, clearly call it a genocide. And of course, there are reasons for this initial caution. One of them, what I have spoken about, the right wing in Brazil, and they really use this Palestine-Israel question inside the politics in Brazil, almost as if importing the conflict inside and criticizing any Labour Party, PT, or other left-wing leaders as pro-Hamas, directly pro-Hamas. It's the kind of rhetoric they use, of course, in a political way for their own base. Just as also in terms of universities, we also have provocations happening from incursions inside the university of far right-wing members of parliament with their base that enter the university to stage confrontation with students, to put this on social media. So there is this climate of pressure from the right wing in Brazil. And of course, it has this effect. We had one moment actually in which the Israeli ambassador, and today Brazil does not have an Israeli ambassador, the relations are downgraded. The Israeli ambassador actually, this was at the beginning, this was in December 2023, when Brazil was still working hard to try to get authorization to bring Brazilian nationals from Gaza back to Brazil when the genocide began. And it was difficult to get the authorization. And so the Israeli ambassador had a meeting with Bolsonaro, who is the ex-president, opposition leader, far-right leader. He had a meeting with Bolsonaro. And this went public, of course, that the idea was for this to go public. And after this meeting, it was stated, Bolsonaro stated, that Bolsonaro, asking for the release of the Palestinian Brazilian in Gaza, and that if they were released, it was thanks to him, And the media take this on, but this didn't last long. Of course, soon it became clear that no, Bolsonaro had nothing to do with this. It was this long effort and work by the Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Affairs to be able to negotiate the rescue of these and three planes brought at this in these first months Brazilians from Gaza. So there are several events, which can probably explain why in the beginning the Brazilian government and the president specifically were slow in becoming more vocal and more active in the condemnation. The second fact was also that Brazil was presiding. It happened to be presiding the Security Council, the United Nations Security Council, just when the thing began, the genocide began, the 7th October plus the genocide, and it was therefore working very hard to get a resolution approved. We got several on board, but the US veto, of course, since then has never allowed this to happen. So this is exactly, those are the main reasons which we believe are probably behind this gradual shift of the Brazilian government. But finally, in January 24, Brazil announced its support, but not yet intervention in the ICJ, in the South African ICJ case. And February that same year, Lula then stated it was a genocide in a very strong declaration he made in a trip to African countries. The media in Brazil went crazy with the declaration, and because he compared what the Israeli government was doing to what the Nazis did, And so, of course, the media went crazy, and they all, criticized Lula so much. So all of these actions have domestic repercussions and lots of tensions behind them. They have not been easy, let's say, to go forward with. Um, Now, as civil society in Brazil, academic civil society, we are really, really happy to see all the declarations that our government makes and the votes in the UN and multilateral forums and in the BRICS, the dialogue with other countries. And we are always asking ourselves, and how about the concrete actions? No? How about the concrete actions? What can we say in terms of actions? Well, this is the process that we are observing. Finally, after almost 2 years, we also see concrete actions on the part of the Brazilian government. Um, well, first, the diplomatic relation, for a series of reasons that I don't really think I have time to speak about here, but they were downgraded and they have been kept downgraded. So this is important. This is relevant, but also after uh, the BRICS meeting in July this year and the Hague Group meeting in Colombia this year, Brazil finally entered. No, began its intervention. It entered the South Africa case. So Brazil now is officially together with South Africa in the case at the ICJ, which is, of course, something that we welcome very much. And also, Brazil took a very important step, which was to leave the IHRA. Brazil was an observer member of the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. This happened during Bolsonaro's government, and now Brazil has left this condition. At the same time, there is a project in the parliament, in the Brazilian parliament, by a right-wing member of parliament for Brazil to adopt this definition as a law inside the country, inside the constitution. Okay, so and several states in Brazil have adopted the IHRA definition, and several municipalities also. But luckily, the country itself. So there's that second layer of conflict, which is very, very important between federal government, states, and municipalities. No, and our parliament is also quite right-wing. So all of these declarations that I would take ages mentioning each and every one of them by the foreign relations and by Lula's, and calling it a genocide and calling countries to get together to oppose this genocide, they have layers and layers of domestic struggles inside the country. Now, there is one very important field where still the problem is to be tackled, and that is the Brazilian free trade agreement. Not Brazilian, it's the Mercosur. Mercosur has a free trade agreement with Israel. It was the first free trade agreement that the Mercosur signed. And this free trade agreement signed back in, it began in 2005, 2006. I think it was actually signed in 2007 or 8. I'm not sure. But anyway, it has a clause that says that settlement products cannot enter the Mercosur through this trade agreement. And we know that this is absolutely, it has no consequence because Israel stamps made in Israel several products that come from settlements, first. And second, the Brazil doesn't really have the mechanisms to verify what comes from settlements and what doesn't. There was also a big campaign against this free trade agreement back in 2005-06. It coincided with the attack on Lebanon in 2006. And so when the attack was happening, the negotiations were suspended. There's a huge Lebanese community in Brazil, and that really worked to suspend the negotiations. But then they came back and it was signed. So at this moment, the focus really of many parliamentarians, there's a parliamentarian front in Brazil for Palestine at this moment, is to try to see if Brazil might eventually leave this free trade agreement, which would be the only way of actually implementing and following the rules of the treaty itself, which prohibit settlement products, but which we cannot guarantee that do not come into Brazil. So there have been these important actions, and there's still much to be done. And there are tensions behind each and every act that happens. And these tensions are also valid for civil society, universities. You know, yeah, we have been working hard, I must say. But for example, when we say that the Center for Palestine Studies was created, and it's a center of the whole Faculty of Humanities, which is a very big faculty. I mean, the University of Sao Paulo has about 90,000 students among undergraduate and graduate. My faculty, the humanities faculties, has almost 30,000. It's huge. And the Center for Palestine Studies is a center of the whole faculty. Each and every department has a representation in the center. Well, it wasn't just like that we built the center. It was really the result of immense struggles in the congregation, discussions, actions, and sometimes we even have the feeling that they gave us the center to keep us quiet, maybe. Anyway, that of course that doesn't happen, and also because the students won't let us keep quiet, right? They're always in the forefront of everything. But the existence itself of the center has been so important. You know, sometimes people think, okay, you build a center and then what do you do? No, there's a whole prehistory of the center, all the research that is being done. And I'd like to see it as if, yeah, I think we reached really a maturity in terms of researchers involved in the history of Palestine and other fields of literature, poetry, studying Palestine in many fields. I'm in the Arabic course, no, although I'm an outsider because I'm not an Arabist, I'm a historian. And I actually come from a completely different field, you know, but anyway, that's a long story. But there's a lot that has been done before the center was created, but the existence of the center now has really attracted things that we hadn't imagined. And of course, it's important in the current context. To begin with, we were really, really happy and really amazed at the inauguration of the conference of the center. You know, we after so much effort in putting everything together and counting with the support, enthusiastic support of some very influential professors at the University of Sao Paulo. Not me, of course, I'm talking about other people, like Paulo Sérgio Pinheiro, who was the Brazilian Secretary for Human Rights during for former governments. We had a session for the inauguration together with Brazilian Francisco Rezec, who was a judge at the International Court of Justice in 94, more or less. He was there in 2000, he was there in 2004 at the ICJ ruling against the wall. So we had him supporting the center. We received an 8-minute video from the Minister of Foreign Affairs. It was a declaration of foreign policy. It was a beautiful video, you know, and we showed that, very happy with this support. We had a video because people who were far away, also from another person who was very important in supporting all this, who was the ambassador to Palestine, Ambassador Alessandro Candeias. So we really managed to put lots of support into launching. And then once it was launched with the significance into the moment, and it started really to attract projects that we wouldn't have imagined. For example, a young boy who came to me during an event and holding the book of his great-grandfather, who was, well, his name is Bruno Stepan, and his great-grandfather was Stefan Hanna Stefan. And there's an article in your website about him, yes. And he had the book that his great-grandfather wrote called This is Palestine. It was the second edition, published in Jerusalem in 1947. So I made him digitalize that immediately, right? So we are, yeah, people who wouldn't have brought this, you know, they're coming with their own stories, their own initiatives to the center. We have a student who wrote an oral history of her father, who was expelled from Kakun, the village of Kakun. Another student who wrote the oral history of her 4 or 5 aunts who were expelled from Lid, who participated in the Great March from Lid. No? And they're all over America, actually. Her father went to Brazil. Her aunt is in the US and, is the diaspora. Another student is working on oral history also of refugees from villages outside Haifa and who are in Tukar today. Uh, and then we have students working on literature and poetry and on Darwish, on poets from the beginning of the 20th century, and so forth. So this is, also the academic part that is really, really heartening for me to see. And then our projects, which include a yearly seminar. And we held the one already last year, and we're preparing for the second one. Now, as I was saying, this glimpse into like one aspect of what's happening in academia should not be separated from other universities. Just yesterday, a university, one of the main universities of the state of São Paulo, approved a boycott, a total boycott with Israeli academic institutions, something that my university has not been able to do. No, just yesterday, the Unicamp approved to cut ties to the Israeli Technion Institute. Yeah, it was coming from last week, but the decision just came. I see you following quite closely. Very good. and other universities have passed motions, but this is like the first really rupture of academic ties. The case in Brazil is not like in the US. Brazil doesn't send money to Israeli universities, And the only academic collaboration that my faculty has, my faculty is one thing, the university is another. The only cooperation that my faculty has that is still ongoing is with the Jerusalem, the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. But for years, we have had no students coming and going. And then just this last year, we had one student, and he was a Palestinian. So, we were okay. We're not going to touch this. Let's hold on. And but the students are for sure. They're acting intensely, both in trying to support the way they can the flotilla at this moment, and now that Unicampi has severed ties with the Technion Institute, they will for sure go into this. Several and I was saying that my faculty is one thing because with everything that happens in there and all the differences in positions, it's a very progressive faculty. We can get things done inside the humanities faculty. When we go out to the rest of the University of São Paulo, it's very difficult. We had 5 students of the university who almost got expelled. There was a process, an administrative process against them for 1.5 years. It finished recently. They were relieved of all charges against them, but it was a really, really heavy, really difficult process. And they were accused of anti-Semitism. And they were accused of anti-Semitism inside the IHRA logic. They actually did use one sentence that they shouldn't have. It wasn't anti-Semitism. They said right at the beginning, as soon as 7th of October happened, as soon as Hamas attacked those places around the Gaza Strip, they, inside a student assembly, they said that there were no civilians in Israel. And then the administration of the faculty that they were in took that to frame this as anti-Semitism, but there were other issues involved. The students were on a strike for different reasons. This institute is very, very right-wing and has Israeli support. This Molecular Sciences Institute inside the faculty. It's a very particular case. Of course, there are civilians in Israel. There are children in Israel. and but that was not what they meant. They meant the involvement of everyone going to the army for 3-4 years, etc. We all know, no. But the thing is, they actually wrote a statement saying they were sorry for this. I read the statement and actually told one of them, "Gosh, you didn't have to say so much. You were sorry. You could, you could have." It was very, very strong, and they, it was no use. And they exactly, because these are the differences we have inside the university, we have inside the country, and. And finally, when we think then of how can we take things forward, how can we move from um, small actions to larger actions? And of course, Trump plan will not solve the situation. This is so clear. It's his second mandate, colonialist mandate for Gaza now. Um, we really have to think of how to put together all the research, all the support, academic support, all the memory preserved, all the oral history, connections between institutes, and how to bring change, not be that passive witness or silent actor, that is always a condition that is kind of over, lapping in when we talk about supporting Palestine from around the world. So taking into consideration all this tension and all these difficulties, each and every opportunity that opens is where we all act, all of us in all our spheres, and that is how it happens. So we have been taking speeches and lectures and activities from the humanities faculty to the law faculty, which has been very difficult, and to other faculties and to other universities. So there is quite a lot going on in terms of universities. And into the media, this is a whole sphere that so much work is done by individual academics, but also by academics that get together to write articles. So we have had a few articles written by 5, 6 academics with considerable weight in society, always in favor of Palestine. And this began even before the genocide, when we understood that the way that the media and the way that official also channels were portraying Palestine was a bit outdated, timid, not enough for the situation that we are living in. So what is what is the perspective in terms of Brazil? Definitely, it's not acting alone, be it in terms of civil society or in terms of government. Acting alone, definitely we will not be able to breach those, those breakthroughs and manage to achieve those breakthroughs. But certainly acting on not only an interconnection between the spheres of society, but also among countries. And there's always a big hope in terms of the BRICS. Well, maybe the BRICS can bring some kind of course, the BRICS represent a counter-hegemonic platform, force. But we stop there. Everything else has to be built. It's not easy and it's not automatic. There are individual countries inside the BRICS that can possibly collaborate together. And I'm sure that this is done in other spheres that I don't even know about. So really, basically, talking about the scenery in Brazil, this is what I want to, without going into all the details which would tire you, I wanted really to bring you a scenery of okay, we need lots of support between us, among us, and to know that we are in a situation now in Brazil where we have a government that is like one of the most forward governments that we can find in terms of supporting Palestinian rights. And we have to find the ways of actions becoming more effective, more with more consequence, with more immediate consequence for Palestine. Now, I didn't even mention that all of Brazil's positions are always inside and always reiterating the two-state solution. So I want just to finish with this. Of course, this is a big difference that exists between civil society understanding of the issue and government and foreign affairs declarations. No? They always act inside this affirmation of the two-state solution. We know Ilan Papi, just to quote him again, just simply because he was in Brazil just now, we know Ilan Papi has a very strong activism for a one state, one democratic state in the whole of the land of historic Palestine. And at the same time, it was interesting to see that at this moment of genocide, he was arguing that um, there is some value in not letting go when institutions, governments affirm and reaffirm the two-state solution. Maybe we don't believe it will happen, or two-state solution and 18% of what is left of the West Bank, and maybe we don't believe it's going to happen. But that means that we should also take this analysis of why it won't happen, of the limits, and why maybe even the distribution of human rights might be an easier path than the two-state solution, a more tangible path than the two-state solution, and have these discussions on all levels. I don't mean then to say that it's useless for governments to state the two-state solution, but I mean to say that we have to work on that. We have to always show that, okay, but if the Palestinians, who are the ones who have to decide what is going to happen, are in the position to decide, that's the best way forward. Not for us to say what is the solution, but to be ready to hear the Palestinian voices. So I want to go back in this dance, going back and forth from the civil society to the government. I want to wrap up really in this movement, really saying that the Brazilian government not only has a position that is probably better than 50% of the society, but sometimes in its actions itself is goes further than even the Palestinian representation in Brazil would ask for. So there's this whole dance. It's not an easy scenario. There are many actors, and many tensions there. And and it's. I think the good part is to be aware of all of them and finding the breaches in which we can act. Always remembering that it's the upholding of Palestinian rights, just that sheer justice, and the Palestinian voice that has to come into the scene for this to really happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this comprehensive and deep overview, if I may say, about Brazilian politics. We know very much how divided societies handle such crucial issues as the issue of Palestine, and we really understand how difficult it is and challenging to work in divided communities as such, and for such controversial issues. And I think a big part of the problem, besides the military, the political, on the ground developments which take place, deals with the narrative. There is a huge controversy about the narrative, and this is very sad because it's sometimes a distorted narrative to see that there is a settler colonial occupation trying to distort the image and to shift the facts on the ground and in the mainstream media. This is why after October 7 at IPS we did additional efforts on the social media, for example, because the youth wanted to learn a lot about the origins of the conflict. The youth which are born in the 2000s and the 2010, so they don't know a lot about the Nakba, the 1948, how things have evolved. So it's very much appreciated, all the effort which you are doing in Brazil and the university in those circumstances, and we really appreciate this as such. I will see if someone would like to ask any question, please.
Maria is coming to Brazil in January. So this is something that our institution is managing to support in collaboration with Editora Tabla. And I think that editing is extremely important. Publishing and translating to Portuguese to change narrative, we have to really like support these cultural initiatives that infiltrate. And actually, I want to ask you a question that is a little bit that could sound problematic, but what I've been witnessing living in Brazil for the last 10 years is how interrelated is the Igreja Universal and the evangelist, like the rise of the evangelist movement and its link to the rise of Zionism. And in the context of genocide, this is extremely worsening and dangerous. I wanted to have your point of view and see like if this is something that has been researched or has been spoken about. I mean, I went and witnessed a few gatherings of these evangelist churches in the midst of the genocide, and what is being told to the poor community in Brazil is brainwashing at a level that is unprecedented. And I don't know how we can stop that. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's take some more questions and then we'll take the answers. Please.
Thank you very much. This meeting confirms that the Palestinian issue is not Palestinian only, it's an international issue because the Zionists are against humanity everywhere. Whenever they come to a Jew person, they are not against Jew, they are against Zionists. And they said, what are you doing here? This is not your homeland. They bring them to our houses, to our homeland. And this means that Zionism is against everybody all over the world. Thank you very much. And we think that there should be lectures everywhere in Europe, United States, everywhere to identify what is the Zionist entity is against humanity.
Just if you may introduce yourself for the others to know.
Sorry?
Just introduce yourself.
My name is Mahmoud Ali. I am the coordinator of Center for Refugee Rights, Aidun.
Okay.
You know what's Aidun?
I know.
Returnees.
I speak Arabic.
We hope one day.
Okay.
And I hope that in future for this center, to try to find somebody who speaks Arabic or translate in Arabic so that it's not only English, so that all the people can understand what's going on. And as I said before, that this issue is not only Arabic issue, it's an international.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmoud. One more question, please. No, it's okay. تفضلي. Okay. خلينا نبلش مع Mrs.
Thank you so much. My name is Jana Al-Qaisi. I'm an activist at heart. I work on the governance of resources, natural resources, which Brazil has a lot of. So thank you so much. This is very interesting, Dr. Allen. I have a question because you did mention BRICS. And yes, as you said, last July, you did host BRICS. And one of the key priorities for Brazil was focusing on trade. Now, I do understand that definitely the academia, with all the policy setting, needs to be there, very much present to influence politics at the end of the day. So my question is a two-pronged one. How comfortable are you in setting or in being vocal about these policies, taking into consideration that Civicus has, ranked civic space as obstructed in Brazil, meaning there are challenges for people to be vocal about certain issues. This is one. And if I want to be, quite blunt, it's we can always, on paper and through emotions, fight Israel, but nothing hurts more than trade. And my friend ChatGPT showed me that over 700 million US dollars exists between exports and imports between Israel and Brazil. Are you going to do something about it? Especially that trade is one of the key priorities for Brazil after your latest BRICS meeting that happened in Rio. Thank you.
Thank you for this excellent question. Mr. Yeah, I think you should. I think you should. Mr. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jad Fayyad, journalist. I would like to ask you what additional actions you think Brazil and the international community should take to support the Palestinian rights, the two-state solution, or the one democratic state solution? What actions the international community and Brazil should take to support the Palestinian rights and the two-state solutions or the one-state democratic solution?
Yeah, you tackled this in one way or another, but you can elaborate if you want. Yeah, two more questions and then the round of answers.
Hi, my name is Carla. I am a tour guide here in Lebanon. I live here around more than 28 years, and I am a Lebanese descent. And I discover also maybe my family, my ancestors came from Palestine because they have the last name Salam in Palestine. So my first question is, do you think that today the judge of ICJ, Judge Julia, I think from Kenya, now she's the first, the president. It was before our first minister nowadays. Do you think it was some movement from United States to to remove him and put her as a president because she was only the one that voted favor to Israel? Do you think it could be some movement from America or from the European countries just to let her to be the president? This is the first question. The second question about the BRICS. I read yesterday, I think yesterday, that China wants to include Palestine in the BRICS. I read this, I don't know which newspaper, I forgot. So they are thinking about to include Palestine in the BRICS. Now, how, if this happen, how would you be about India that is the aliado, ally of Israel? How, because India is very ally of Israel. How to be the conditions of India inside the BRICS? It's a very complex, I think. But if they want really to include Palestine in the BRICS, that which I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Okay, one last question before we give you the floor again.
Okay, my name is Anis Mohsen. I'm the editorial secretary of Arabic Journal of IPS. My question is, as all we know that there are Arab communities in America and Brazil and other countries. Most of them before 1948 and even during the First World War. Even one of my uncles in Argentina is still there. His ancestors, I mean, or his nephews, sorry. So the question is there any role of the Arab communities, Lebanese, and some are Palestinians in Brazil? And first, in the interior policies of Brazil, as many of the Arab communities were pro-right wings in America. Second, is there any role for the Arab community, Lebanese especially because it's a big community in Brazil, and Palestinian community, it's not a big one, it's a small one. During these last 2 years of the genocide in Gaza? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anis. Please.
Okay. So I noted down the last one. Let me see if I remember now the first ones. Yeah, you started off mentioning you're in Rio de Janeiro. Yeah, so beautiful, great. I love the initiative. Tabla editor has made a huge difference in Brazil. I mean, before Tabla, we didn't have publications, translations, very few. I mean, we had the Arabian Nights, my colleague, Mamed Mustafa Jarouche. He's amazing. He's a really amazing person, amazing. A bit crazy too. Anyway, but he translated directly from Arabic the Arabian Nights, 5 volumes with huge research. It's like, you know, he said he was almost killing Sherazade at the end, but okay. So we had very little. We had some important work being done, but very little in terms of publications and translations. And now we have lots of translations. And what's really, really good also is that that's giving our students work, because our students are the people translating from Arabic all this literature. No? Our graduate students, under the orientation of Safra Joubran, who's a Lebanese. She's the best Arabic teacher in Brazil, you know. I'm enthusiastic about my colleagues, yeah. Okay, anyway, so this is a great initiative. And then your question was exactly, which one? Oh, yeah, the evangelical. Yeah, well, the evangelical today are like 27% of the population. Uh, no, the census of 2022 indicated 27% of the population. We have the impression that they might be more. And another thing that has been, luckily, anyway, proven false is the impression or the idea that they were growing very fast. They're not growing that fast. They are growing. It's the largest growing religious group in Brazil, but they're growing less fast than we had the idea that was the case. No? So 2022, they were 26.9% of the population. Today, not much more than that. No? And you're right, however, that the preachers, in many cases, are brainwashing the people. I mean, we have demonstrations in which the population, the people in these, they go with the Israeli flag, and then someone comes up and interviews now these ladies with Israeli flags, and they say, okay, why are you holding this lady, the Israeli flag? Oh, because we are Israel. That sentence, we are Israel. So there's a total symbiosis, a total identification. Oh, really? And why are you Israel? Because it's Christian. Yeah, yeah. But not all the churches are far right-wing, radical, and in politics, as, for example, Assembleia de Deus, Assembleia de Deus e Jesus Cristo, whatever, they changed the name of the church. No, the Silas Malafaia, this huge, powerful, right-wing, evangelical, Zionist, etc., Bolsonaro ally, right? So there are differences. We also have to understand that it's not all one big thing, but it's very worrying. And there are studies being done on that. International studies also, not only local studies being done on that. But there is the problem that, for example, the Labour government, the PT, no, they have a huge task in trying to reach these people, and they're not able to. It's the right wing that is managing to reach this population of evangelical, especially the politicized part. And these churches, these very small churches, they serve a function in society, you know. They comfort people. They go into the favelas. They're close to the poor. They're, you know, so you have to offer an alternative if you want to solve this. And the left wing is really having a hard time trying to reach them. The left wing came from a history of trade unions. And the trade unions are not powerful as they used to be, and the labor movement has declined. It's not the same thing, no? And where are the people going now? They're going to the churches. They're not going to the unions. It's a different labor force, different, completely. So it's really difficult. It's an immense challenge. I agree. Don't mention it. I will come to that. Yeah. Yeah, right. And then the second question regarding yeah, the question of Palestine is an international question, but specifically the question was there was one point. Okay, okay, easier. That's easier. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, 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 yeah. But there's something that there's something that I can say about that, which is on the grassroots level. There are so many connections that people are not aware of. The landless movement in Brazil has connections to Palestine, and not only that does it have connections. Actually, the modes of organization of working the land and community organization, I really defend that they should have more contact with Palestine because there are models that can really help Palestinian agricultural autonomy. Because the problem with Palestinian agriculture is not that they don't have agriculture; they don't, they cannot trade, and they cannot. So there are models that are developed in Brazil that could really be in contact and dialogue with Palestinian agriculture. And I mean, we have the houseless movement in Brazil. They actually have a neighborhood that they named Palestine. No? We had an occupation of a building, an empty building in the city of Sao Paulo that was called Occupation Leila Khaled. It was in, so there's lots of grassroots activism and interconnections, but it's more from Brazil to Palestine than from Palestine to Brazil, of course. Because Palestine is really a great symbol and a cause for all these movements. And I really think that lots of dialogue can still happen there. The course that we organized, Brazil and Palestine Sources of Identification, did put side by side scholars of these different movements. Yeah. Yeah, so when I thought of sources of identification, it was both texts, text documents. So we had some of that, and also the movements, the landless, the indigenous. We have the indigenous struggle in Brazil is already a defeat. I mean, they're struggling inside a defeat, right? And there are so many parallels with what is happening with the Bedouin in Palestine now. Being set in lots that completely destroy their culture, their traditional ways of life. And this is happening to the indigenous of Brazil, close to Sao Paulo, for example, or outside of Sao Paulo. So there are so many. It's international. It really is international. Then you mentioned yeah, first you mentioned how is it to be vocal, right, in Brazil. Well, it's yeah, I mean, listen, if there are problems, I don't look at them. I'm kidding. There are more and more people in Brazil that are vocal. And of course, social media created space for this that before didn't exist. And there is, let's say, Israeli institutional pressure, of course, absolutely. And sorry? Well, it depends on the government. Depends on the government. I mean, now we're taking advantage of everything we can with the government we have, right? So we don't know what's coming next. Yeah. Then you went on to ask, the second question, of course, was the trade. Yeah. Well, Brazil has taken one very important step that I didn't mention. I had this presentation made by one of our researchers at the Center for Palestine Studies, very nice with all the actions that were taken. I don't like presentations so much because we're tied to them, but then I forgot to talk about this. Actually, Brazil canceled the purchase of how many howitzers, these armored vehicles, 17. It was a huge, huge deal that the military in Brazil really were, keen on having. It was going to happen, and because of the context of the genocide, Celso Amorim, which is the special advisor to the president, former, foreign affairs, he mainly through his actions, interventions. Well, Brazil canceled the deal. It was canceled. So this was really really big. Yes. So we do have trade. We do have, and this trade, it's how do you say, it's more of an advantage even to Israel than to Brazil if you analyze the trade that we have. Yes, exactly. Yeah. There's certainly, and even the products that Brazil buys, could most probably find other sources. But when it comes to business, each step is a big step and it's a big struggle. It's absolutely, yes. And that's where the solution lies. I have no illusion that it has to be through business, through money, through trade. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's really, it's what was left, UN resolutions. Well, I mean, we don't have to say this here. Everyone knows that this is senseless. Recognizing the Palestinian state. Oh yeah, recognize it. But it's really through trade that we can make a difference. And this will depend really on civil society pressure. Yeah, yeah, yes. Then you asked about, what is the solution? I took advantage of that to point exactly to where I don't see any other solution, or is really, but there's also one important thing, very important, that I have felt throughout the years in my activities, that governments around the world really have to understand that the Palestinian voice is not one, it's plural. There are several Palestinian voices, and we should be able to bring them in and listen to all of them. There's always that excuse, oh, they're not unified. They're not, okay, but history hasn't given them a chance, has it? So listen to civil society, listen to the different partners, the different actors. It's this sole representation, exclusive representation is not helping. I think around the world, I was active in the struggle in 2005 against the free trade agreement. I went to Parliament to speak against the free trade agreement in 2005. In the end, it was signed with that clause saying that we cannot have products from the settlements. Really useless. But then I will tell you that the Palestinian representation didn't ask for anything else. Okay? So, why should Brazil do anything else? So there are many layers to that. But we have to learn to listen to the several Palestinian voices. Yeah, we really have to. And then the solution will only come through the Palestinians and through us learning that if we have to defend a solution, it's to say, what do they want? Yeah. So if it's a two-state, if it's a one-state, if it's a whatever state, okay, let's just help end what is against international law, what is against human rights, and the injustice, the genocide. It's very good that Brazil calls it a genocide since the beginning. And listen, and then listen and try to support these several voices and not be maybe stuck to preconceived notions that are not taking us anywhere. Then, yes, the diaspora. Yes. Yeah, the diaspora. Well, the Lebanese diaspora in Brazil, the Arab diaspora in Brazil, mainly Lebanese and Syrian, and then maybe 200,000 Palestinians, some Egyptians. It's huge. Years ago, it was 11, 12 million. Now we're up to 15, maybe more million Arab descendants in Brazil, and they're not very active in politics in terms of upholding Palestinian rights. Okay, they were important. However, they were important in certain moments. So it's not something to be said, oh, they're not. No, they are, depending. For example, when Bolsonaro tried to move the Brazilian embassy to Jerusalem, it was this sector, but specifically the meat producing, the halal meat producing sector, that pressured him and said, no, no, if this happens, come on, we're going to have a problem with our business, you know. And Bolsonaro understands money, and and then Brazil created an office there, a commercial office, whatever, but didn't change the embassy. So they can, you know, they have to understand that they can make a difference. They also made a difference during the negotiations, which I followed for the free trade agreement. As I was said, while Israel was attacking Lebanon and Gaza, negotiations were suspended for the time being, and then they went back. So they can make a difference, but they are not doing that now. They are not active now. The Palestinian community is, but the overall Lebanese, Arab immigration, they're not active. Yeah.
We're a bit tight on time. Okay. One final remark, quick. Yeah.
Individuals are, I don't want to generalize, okay? But in terms of community making a difference as a collective group, yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, but just to, since she said that, just to wrap this up, also the genocide has created the situation in which right-wing segments of society or conservative segments of society are horrorized. They're you know, so people come to me in the streets, you know, and they are really in horror at what is happening. Okay, so there is a breach, no? There is a change. And this is what I was saying at the beginning. There are changes happening. They're happening fast. And it's the moment, of course, to act fast because these changes are happening fast. And for example, in terms of government actions, we're seeing a fast development of course, and responding to what is happening on the ground. No? So yes, this is right. But there is a situation now in which the idea of upholding Palestinian rights, it can pass left to right, right to left, and detach itself from these segments. Now, as it should, because Palestinian rights should be above all this segmentation and political segmentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clemesha. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'd like to announce next Wednesday, we have a 3-day conference between Beirut, Ramallah, and Washington. This is the poster. It's Palestine at a historical juncture. The Beirut Day will be next Wednesday. It will be held at the USG, University of St. Joseph. And we'd love to have you if you can join us. And thank you so much for this insightful. Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining us and for your help in organizing this as well. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.